Hey, Aaron, good to see you.
You as well.
Yeah, how are things?
Excellent, excellent. And with you?
Doing really well. I'm really excited that we're getting back together to talk about conversations again today.
I am as well. And for all that are joining us live, please feel free to use the question and answer feature, and we'll do our best to include you in our conversation today. And for those that might be listening to us remotely on our YouTube channel, love to engage with you. So please feel free to reach out to either of us or both of us to have a conversation. And John, I remember the last time we got to chat, we talked about conversations and how they seem to be so rare these days. We talked about cognitive biases, these kind of brain flaws that sometimes make conversations more difficult. So we laid that foundation. And today, we really wanted to get into a couple of very specific conversations, a connecting conversation, an expectation conversation, ones that we feel are critically important to building cultures that people want to be part of, and most importantly, that they want to be highly engaged in those.
Yeah, I think it's important to remind people that so the background of what we're talking about here is we think that one of the biggest issues facing first responder organizations today is this challenge of really attracting enough of the right people and keeping them. And that what they're telling us, when you listen closely to the worker of today, the worker of today is saying that they have some very specific things that they want from work, and they have some very specific choices that they believe that they can make. And one of those is to vote with whether they stay in your organization or not. And even more so whether they join your organization or not. And the bottom line is, if for those who've worked with us, we're talking about creating amazing organizational cultures where people really enjoy working. And that doesn't mean where work is necessarily easy, but where people really enjoy working and are thoroughly and completely engaged in the organization. And for us, that engagement, of course, is this warm and positive relationship between the employee and the organization. And we believe that the currency, the leadership currency that you're going to use to create that engagement, is largely around conversations.
And as you shared, not only is this decision that the worker makes about whether they join organizations and stay, what I think many of our clients find is equally, if not even more detrimental to an organization, is those who do join the organization and choose not to engage. Those individuals that, because of this choice about engagement, really draw and drag the organization down from the inside. And so what we want to talk about is how we change that, how we create organizations with great cultures where people want to be engaged with them. They have this positive feeling, as John mentioned. They're enthusiastic, they're committed, they're loyal, they're willing to do more than expected. And we don't think it takes rocket science. We think it takes 10 conversations. And two we want to really stress today are ones that we should do often, but have very little intensity, anxiety around them. So if we think of a pyramid, and this pyramid goes this way, and the intensity of the conversation heads over this way, down on this side is probably like coaching, investigations. They feel very intense, and hopefully we don't do them very often. Here are things that we hopefully do all the time that don't feel intense, feel very easy. And the first one we wanted to talk about is just a connecting conversation. I want to get to know John. John and I work together. Maybe I'm a frontline supervisor in the SafeTech Solutions ambulance service, and John is part of my team, part of my area of responsibility. And I want to get to know him so that down the road, when there are conversations, other conversations we need to have, I've already created a relationship. I've created a connection. Because imagine if I haven't. Oh, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I love that you mentioned the word relationship, because what keeps people in organizations is the positive relationship with the people that they work with, and especially their immediate boss.
Yeah.
As we typically say, EMS workers are called to the cause. They have to be one to the organization, but they'll stay and leave the organization based on the relationship with their immediate boss.
Yeah. So imagine there's some shortcoming in John's performance, and I need to talk to him about it. Often we use this term, a crucial conversation. And Brene Brown, for those that want to read, maybe watch YouTube, she has wonderful little shorts that she has. She talks about this difference between kind and nice. Nice is when I tell John what he wants to hear. Kind is when I tell John what he needs to hear. So imagine I need to have this conversation with John, and we have never really interacted. I don't know anything about him. And yet, one morning, he's just about to jump in the truck. I say, hey, John, got a minute? I've noticed you've been tardy 5 times here. And I just have to tell you, that's just not acceptable in our organization. And, John, if you can't get here on time, then, we'll have to take the next actions in a progressive disciplinary action process. So, John, any questions? Are you clear about what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's the relationship is very thin, right?
Yeah, and if there was one, there isn't one now. And of course, we put this in the context of many of you that might be listening, which is maybe the supervisor's assigned to the truck, so I have to do this while my partner is waiting because it was already a call assigned, and John's got to get in because he's got to get out to the post. And basically, I just get him the information, the what and the how. So we want to spend a few minutes talking about a connecting conversation that feels so obvious, and almost to the point where you might go, why are they talking about this? So let me pause first and say why we're talking about it. First, because so many of our systems see a connecting conversation, because it requires a lot of time, as highly unproductive. I have yet to see an EMS measure that measures this time. We measure unit hour utilization. We measure time on task, shoot times, response times, the list goes on. And this connecting conversation is going to bite into all of them. While we use the word unproductive to catch your attention, maybe get a little of the JVD to pop out and a little facial flush to get going, of course, we think they're incredibly productive, worth pounds and pounds of pounds in the emotional relationship. So we're talking about them because we believe that many of us see them in our organization as unproductive, and we think they're critical. They take a lot of time using these, and not really this. And the leader's got to go first. I need to reach out to John, and probably, hey, John, if you're a brand new person in our organization and I'm your assigned supervisor and we haven't interacted, and the first time I see you, I say, hey, John, you got a minute? What goes through your mind?
Yeah, what have I done wrong, and what's coming my direction?
Yeah. So the first time we just chat, I might say, how you doing? I know you're in your first few weeks here. How's it going? John's probably going to give me something superficial. Okay. And then maybe the next time.
Right, because what I'm doing at that stage is really the relationship's under construction. And the building blocks of the relationship are built through this conversation. And I just wanted to pause for a minute and say that often, Aarron, when we go out and talk to people in organizations and do organizational assessments, one of the questions that we ask frontline employees is we ask them, who's your immediate boss? And they tell us it's Joe, or it's Bill, or it's Susan. And then we say, how often do you see them? And people will say, I see them enough, or I see them when I have to, or I see them when I need to. But then the key question that we ask is, how would you characterize that the majority of your interaction with that person, as positive, neutral, or negative? And interestingly, and of course it's subjective, right? It's up to them. But often what we hear is neutral or negative. And that's not the path to an engaged employee. And so back to what you're talking about, is it takes a lot of time to swing that perception from neutral or negative over to positive. In fact, we often hear this story amongst first responders who like to work off shifts. They want to work weekends or nights, and you ask them why, and they'll say, I don't want to be around the bosses. And their perception is that any interaction with the boss is negative. And what you can read, folks, from that is that any interaction with the organization is negative. And they're fundamentally likely to be either not engaged or actively disengaged employees if they don't have a positive. And the onus on building, back to this, remember, they're called to the cause and have to be won to the organization. The onus on winning them to the organization is on the supervisor or manager through this connecting conversation.
And I wanted to just share why I am really passionate about this subject in this first conversation, amongst all of them, but especially this first. As I've had a chance to work with many of our clients over the last months, what I'm finding is little, if any, time spent connecting with those that they work with, and those that they work for, and those that who work for them. And what I hear is a regular story that says, yeah, I had that tough conversation with John and it blew up. It went horribly wrong. And as I ask questions, and the questions around how often do you get to talk to John? What do you talk to John typically about? How much time do you spend together? And what I hear is little or no time, usually in the leadership team meeting. But we have 25 items on the agenda, and we only have 30 minutes to cover them all. And what I hear is no time spent connecting. And so people feel backed into a corner. They feel attacked. They don't feel vulnerable with the person because there's no relationship there. Trust is missing. I just want us to pause and spend some time connecting with folks so that we begin to deepen and strengthen the relationship. Or what I liked even better was John's analogy of the construction. I'm going to build this house. If the relationship is a house, I don't start with the shingles. I might build a foundation.
Yeah.
And as I build this house of the relationship with John, there might be things that jeopardize it, right? If there's a day that I have to have the tough conversation with John, the house might be there and it's ready, it's done, it's fully finished, but now I just ripped the shingles off. Okay, probably going to have to do a little bit of maintenance and get shingles back on. Maybe I mess up. I make a mistake. Let's say John and I are on the leadership team together. He frustrates me one time. And after the leadership team meeting, I go to somebody else. Did you hear what John said? Can you believe it? Oh my goodness. If I pull the drama triangle and John hears about it, I may have just kicked out one of the foundational walls. I'd have to put a little maintenance in and rebuild the foundational wall.
So I love that you're doing this. And I think I just wish people would learn this, that the antidote to drama in an organization, and often we hear people come to us and say, we have too much drama in our organization. There's too much toxicity. There's too much drama. The antidote to drama is is trust. When people really trust each other, and you can't have trust without these connecting conversations that take an investment of time. Because each time Aarron and I have a connecting conversation, what we're doing is beginning to build that relationship stronger. It's as if we're putting another 2x4 in. It's as if we're putting another floor joist in. We're building something that's strengthening it, so that when we do have to have a more difficult conversation, there is strength in the relationship that can endure it, and there won't be the drama. So if you want an absence of, so here's what we often talk about. Everybody that we're working with says, help us get more accountability with less drama. We want accountability frequently, fast, without drama. That only happens when there's real clarity about the relationship and that we can trust it, because accountability can happen. That's when I hold Aarron accountable, say, hey, Aarron, you were supposed to do XYZ. Why isn't it done? If there's a solid relationship there, he's not going to personalize it. He's going to recognize that I care about him as a human being, that he genuinely belongs and that he's safe on our team, and that I'm simply asking about the issue XYZ at hand. And that only comes through this. So here's the question, Aarron. How can people do this? We don't account for it, right? It's unproductive time. How can, I mean, this is the $64,000 question. How can people do this in busy EMS organizations where crews are coming in, picking up trucks, leaving, where they're short staffing, where people are just trying to fulfill things? How do we get this done?
Yeah, so let me give the theoretical answer and then what I feel is the practical answer. So the theoretical answer is there's plenty of time for it. When we say we're busy in our organizations, what we're saying is we have made a whole bunch of things important and a whole bunch of things not important. We have plenty of time in the day to have that mandatory meeting, to make sure everybody gets the ACLS class done. The list goes on. So the theoretical thing is, as leaders, all of you listening, begin to make this as important as you make everything else. We found plenty of time to have that emergency meeting about COVID. We had plenty of time to have this, and the other thing. Can we also start making this whole thought about engagement, culture, connecting the same weight? We give operational excellence weight 1/3 of our time. We give clinical excellence 1/3 of our time. Could we give cultural excellence 1/3 of our time? Okay, there's the sermon. So maybe practical. Just start doing it. Right? We don't have to take, 4 out of my 8-hour day to do this. Maybe today, small bites. Can I just get 10% better at this? So maybe I have 10 people I'm responsible for, so I can do math in my head. I want to be 10% better. So maybe today I take one of my 10, probably more like one of my 50 that I'm responsible for. And if I want to get 10% better, a couple of them. And I just go, I just reach out, make sure that I maybe come in a little bit early, I stay a little bit late, and I'm just, hey, John, I don't think I've got to spend a lot of time with you as you're new to our organization. And certainly we have many things going on. I'm just wondering if you'd tell me a little bit about yourself. Any hobbies, anything you really like, anything you really dislike? I know for me, afraid of heights. I don't like heights. And maybe there's just 2 or 3 minutes where I share a little vulnerability, and maybe John will share a little bit of vulnerability. But remember, using metaphors again, John, you often talk about trust as this bridge that gets built out over these difficult waters between what I know and what I hope for. So that's true. The very first time I talked to John, between these two mountains with the difficult waters in between, it's probably a single strand rickety bridge. But the next time I begin to invest in the relationship, maybe now gets a little thicker, and maybe eventually it's the concrete bridge with steel girders because I've invested in it. I continue to build, reinforce. So I think we just got to start doing it. And don't expect it goes from nothing to everything. Can I just get 10% better? What do you think, John? How do we just start doing it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that we like to teach about connecting conversations, and one is that going into a connecting conversation, you have to be really aware of your mindset. And what I mean by mindset is that, and I'll just give you an example. Yesterday, I was talking to somebody and I wanted to just genuinely connect with them. That was the purpose of connecting with them. And as we got together in this conversation, they took off and said something that set me off. They mentioned something that then caused me to make all kinds of assumptions that then triggered my previous judgments. So what's really important in connecting conversations is to know that we come to each relationship with each human with preconceived notions and judgments. The minute somebody walks into our office or walks into our room, we're making judgments about them. And we can't stop doing that. That is important, and it helps keep us safe, and it's part of just how our brains work. What we can do is bring awareness, and that's what I mean by mindset. If we really bring awareness to the mindset and to the judgments and assumptions that we have, we can shove them aside. If we don't pay attention to them and bring awareness to them, then they run us. And so in this conversation yesterday, I noticed right away that one of my judgments was triggered. And then I just set it aside. And the second thing we teach when we're really talking about connecting conversations is, as you're aware of your assumptions and judgments, cultivate some curiosity. So it simply begins with some asking some questions. So and the questions aren't necessarily what you verbalize, but what first you ask in your head. I wonder why he's saying that. I came to have a connecting conversation with Aarron, and all he talked about was he started bitching about the schedule. So that made me think, wow, into my judgments. Oh, well, wait a minute. What's Aarron really concerned about? What's Aarron really worried about? What does Aarron really want from this job? How could I help his day be better? When I switch to curiosity, what happens is you could easily put the assumptions and judgments on a shelf, and then I create openness to asking some real questions. So the curiosity then allows me to the third area that we often talk about when we talk about connecting conversations, which is genuinely seeing and hearing someone. And this is the fundamental ingredient to connecting with people, is people want to be seen and heard. And this is this idea of mindsets, curiosity, and seeing and hearing are the skills and tools we need to be teaching supervisors. This is at the fundamental level of helping them really begin to be these master communicators that they need to be on the front line.
And a couple things to not do that we teach and really emphasize is, first, no agenda.
Yeah, not in a connecting conversation.
Yeah, what we mean by that is, hey, John, do you got a couple minutes? How was your weekend? Because I'm really just trying to break the ice, because I need to tell them about the new memo that went out, or the deployment that's changing, or something like that. A true connecting conversation its agenda is simply about getting to know John through building and strengthening a relationship. So if there's an agenda, that's it.
Yeah.
And this is a weakness of mine, which is, don't ask a question simply so that you get to tell somebody something. So if I want to tell John a story about skiing, I don't ask John, hey, have you gone skiing lately? Because then I want to say, oh, I did. And, so I love curiosity. Because I'm curious about John. I just want to know what makes him tick. And the other thing is, and I know we've talked about it in other conversations and other of our Leadership Alive series, is no poop sandwich. Right. And what we mean by that is we have to tell John something tough. And so we use connecting as the icebreaker. Please don't do that. Don't do it for so many reasons. And if two that I'll emphasize is, one, it undermines your credibility. Right. It says to John, I'm a little weak here and I really don't know how to do this. And so I want to make this less uncomfortable for me. So I'm going to try to start with the happy bun and then slip in the bad stuff and then more of the happy bun underneath. And it also doesn't show any respect to the other person. I mean, the men and women and the individuals who make up emergency medical services can go out and handle some of the most horrific things. And all those individuals who staff all of the rest of the things for our crews to go on the calls, from our dispatchers to our fleet, to our billers, to everybody in between, to the folks that help regulate and lead the systems in our state, they can take it. And we show them respect when we do that. So please avoid the work agenda. And please avoid what we often call the poop sandwich. Say something nice, say the bad thing, say something nice again.
Well, and Aarron, I like that you're saying, pointing out those avoidances, because that gets back to the idea of what the employee is asking themselves about you. So when you come to them, they're really asking this question of, am I seen? Am I heard? Am I respected? Am I valued? Is there something about me that Aarron genuinely is connecting with, or am I just a tool for his success?
No.
And remember, the employees have assumptions and judgments too. Many of the employees believe, many EMS employees that we talk to have two judgments about anybody above them. They say that anybody in supervision, management, or leadership doesn't care about them and doesn't listen to them. And so if you go in recognizing that that might be there, show them the opposite. Yeah. Show them that you indeed care about them and that you do it. There's a little quote here from the journalist Scott London, who's a wonderful writer about dialogue and communication. He describes what we're talking about this as a form of discussion aimed at fostering mutual insight and common purpose. The process involves listening with empathy, searching for common ground, and exploring new ideas and perspectives, and bringing unexamined assumptions out in the open. When you start connecting, the first one may be, oh, I went skiing this weekend. How's the family? How's the dog? How's the kids? But what you're going to find is as the foundation of this relationship gets built, it goes deeper. And Aarron, I just think about our relationship. Often you and I can very quickly, because we connect a lot, can very quickly talk about very meaningful stuff. Stuff that's bothering us, stuff that's challenging us, stuff that we're delighting in, what we're finding real joy in. But that's then where then we can start talking about, with our employees, talking about stuff that really matters. And that leads to the whole rest of the 10 conversations, right? Or the other 9.
Yeah. And I think there is a real applicability in this analogy that John just shared. So John and I are half a nation apart from each other, often talking remotely, talking through phone, talking through email. And so not unlike many of you who have remote employees with bases all over the place and leaders that are super busy. And so without investing in connecting, people are going to create all kinds of narratives. And that's what we're really talking about here. And that's what we're reading from Harvard Business Review and Forbes magazine about the Great Resignation. Is the number one thing that people said was, my employer doesn't listen. And so it's really building upon that. And so imagine John and I are running this business, half a country apart, often communicating through electronic kinds of ways. And if we're not regularly interacting, building and strengthening that bridge that we have of trust and connecting, firing off a quick email that seems to make perfect sense to me and has maybe one line in it with a dozen words. John could easily see that and probably does see something and goes, what the heck does that mean? Where's he coming from? And also in a narrative. But when the connection is there, he might go, I wonder if he's having a bad day. Did he hit send too soon? I know him. I trust him. I respect him. I hope all of these are true. Feel free to disagree at any point. He doesn't create a new narrative. And John had such a wonderful point of many EMS people come to this profession already with challenges with authority, this want to be independent, and such and such. And so we have to start showing them something different. Because if we want to do the next conversation, which we think is so critical, especially because of our current workforce, a workforce that's made up of now we call them Zers, 20-somethings, millennials, 30-somethings primarily, and then we have Xers and Yers and baby boomers and such, but primarily 20 and 30-somethings who we believe have often never had this hard landing. We need to have regular expectation conversations. And without a relationship, as you noticed when we role played a little bit, and I'm like, hey, John, you have tardies and such. If you watch John, as I like to do, you could immediately see kind of the facial expression of, I'm not engaged. I don't care. Say whatever you want, buddy. I'm just going to jump in my truck and do it. Or, you know what, I'll just go to the 15 other ambulance services that are currently looking for people. I mean, you saw it in his face. You saw the Peanuts cartoon, rah, 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 rah. Didn't care. So John, before we jump into the next one, anything you wanted to add on to the connecting conversation?
I just want to end by saying these should be points of joy.
Yeah.
These should be points of joy for both parties. This should be what you look forward to. And this is why when you begin to invest in this, the intrinsic rewards that emerge from simply connecting with people and valuing them, when we start seeing people as their potential and what they can be and who they are and welcoming them into our organization, that makes us feel good and it makes them feel good. And it's part of, so if you want to create a culture that people enjoy coming to work with, it should be seasoned with tons and tons of connecting conversations. It should be the #1 currency in the organization, is people connecting with each other in a very human way, in a very caring way.
Yeah, we know who's the best innovator, who's the best IV starter, who can take the call the best, who's the best at collections. It's not hard to also know who's the gourmet chef out there, who wants to go to Disneyland this summer with their family, who's the best long distance shooter, and the list goes on. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Is I know John wants to become a great fly fisherman. I know that something on his list. I learned recently in a connecting conversation that he plays guitar and almost every single day. I know he loves to build model ships and model boats. That's the stuff we're talking about, is getting to know the person, making those investments, building that house, that relationship. So then we can do some of the next ones. And this conversation about expectations. So John, this is something that you really, when we first designed the 12 conversations, recognized one was missing.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So one of the questions that everybody's asking these days is, how do we take a new generation of workers and who may come to the workforce young and without a lot of life experience, and perhaps not having had much difficulty in their life? How do we help them do a very difficult job? And let's get serious. I mean, if you're gonna take an EMT paramedic course and you're gonna sign up to be a first responder and you're gonna position yourself to be in a place where you run toward the bad stuff that's happening to take good care of people, this is a very difficult job. And we call these high risk, high stress, high expectation, high responsibility professions. They have all of these sort of high levels of demand out of them. And one of the things that we're learning about this new group of workers coming in is that they perform best when the expectations are very clear and continually put before them.
Sorry, John, the research about the 20-somethings, the 30-somethings, the Zs, the millennials, doesn't support a lot of what we feel about them. So when we ask in our Leadership Academy, tell us what you feel about the 20-somethings, 30-somethings, we hear, they're self-centered, they don't work hard, they're not motivated, they're egotistic, they're all of that. The research doesn't show that. The research shows that when they believe in a cause, they're some of the hardest workers they can be. They're excellent with technology. But what the research does show, this concept of hard landing, is that many of them grew up with parents who they're often called either helicopter parents or bulldozer parents. And what those terms mean is the helicopter parent hovered over their child all throughout their life. This concept of not having hard landings. Or the bulldozer parent is one who kind of pushed any obstacle away from them and solved it for them. And so what we're trying to suggest is that when we get really clear with them about expectations, they do extraordinarily well. You may share the expectations and they may say, not it for me. Now we know. You may share the expectations and they may go, got it. All of us are probably guilty. I'm guilty of sometimes looking for where the line is in the sand. Oh, it isn't there. I got by with that. Maybe, at home, Michelle cooked, my wife, and I'm supposed to do dishes. Whoever cooks doesn't have to do dishes. And I did it and she did them. I wonder if I can do that again. We're all guilty of that. It's human nature.
Yeah. So when it comes to these conversations, what I want to invite people to do is to slow down a little bit about expectations. What are they? So when we think about expectations, these are beliefs about occurrences that will happen in the future, or another way to say this is these are assertions or clarifications about what's desired or required. And they go both ways. So the employee has expectations of the employer, and the employer has expectations of the employee. But where the problem is when we go talk to people and simply listen to them, what we find is there is a disconnect on both sides. A disconnect that the employees don't really understand what the expectations are, and the employers don't really understand what the expectations are from the employees. So there's a disconnect there. So here's a way to begin to think about it. A way to begin to think about it is what are we expecting of our employees, and do they know it? And so there's sort of three categories of expectations. And the first is the non-negotiables. Those we might call what you've got written in policy. Got to show up on time, got to have a uniform on, got to go on calls when the pager goes off, got to fill out a chart, got to take good care of patients. Those would all be the non-negotiables. And those are important. And a question should be, do your people really understand those? Do they understand what's expected of them? Because often what happens is the expectation doesn't come to light until it's not met. So what we're saying is right on the heels of a connecting conversation, the next most important conversation you should be having with people is what's expected of them. So that first category, the non-negotiables. The second category of expectations is what's it like to work here culturally? These are the cultural do's and don'ts of the organization. This is how we show up in terms of attitude, whether we have a smile on our face, whether we piss, moan, whine, and bitch about everything. This is about rather how we treat one another, how we talk to each other, how we gossip or not gossip. All of those kinds of things are the cultural expectations. What's it like to work here? We should be talking about that all the time. Because if we're going to create a culture that people love to come to work and where they find it to be fun, friendly, like a team, where they really are supporting each other and have each other's backs, we've got to talk about that. So the non-negotiables, the cultural expectations, what's it like to work here? And then the third one is, what's it like to work for me? If I am your supervisor, I have certain things that are my hot buttons. I have certain things that I care about. I have certain things that I want to happen. What's it like to work for me? When I talk about these expectations, often there then is no question about how we are going to be together. But I'm going to flip that on its head, Aarron. There's also a question to be asked when we're talking about expectations. What is the employee expecting of the job? So that's the non-negotiables. What are they expecting of the organization, the cultural stuff? What are they expecting of me as their supervisor? So notice how this conversation doesn't have to be heavy. This conversation should be a dialogue back and forth in which we're saying, hey, I just want to remind you, during this difficult time, we are expecting X, Y, Z, but I also want to know what you're expecting. What are you expecting? And you know what? Often we get kind of the jaw dropping open when we ask, what are you expecting? Because it's never asked. No one asks them what they're expecting of work. But once we start this expectation dialogue, we can begin to start seeing what it is that we're supposed to do and begin to fulfill that.
Yeah, and I wanted to connect this comment in with a question that just came in for us, which is, how do we do these expectation conversations without them feeling heavy or feeling dictatorial or feeling like I'm micromanaging? And it's really the crux of what we're encouraging, this paradigm shift that we're asking for. So imagine again this triangle that I have, and down here at this end of the triangle are conversations that have very little intensity. They're really easy. They're fun. But we should do them all the time. And then this triangle goes up and it gets harder and more intense. Right next to connecting, which should be really easy and we do all the time, should be an expectation conversation. Yeah, it's a little bit harder, feels a little heavier, but not much. But we do them a lot. So when we do them a lot, it doesn't become that out of the blue, where did this come from? They blindsided with it. You know, it's that eval thing. Geez, it would have been nice if you would have told me 9 months ago about this rather than you saved it up for me on the eval, whether that's true or not. So let's go back to the tardy thing. So I'm going to try to the best of my humble abilities to do tardies as it's non-negotiable and tardies as kind of a culture thing. So imagine if when I grab John, I say, hey, John, you got a couple quick minutes?
Sure.
So John, I wanted to talk to you about tardies. I've noticed looking at your time card that there's 5 times when you've been 15 minutes or more late for work here. Is that true?
Yeah.
So I want to be really clear about something. Being on time is not something we negotiate. I know you're still fairly new. The times we've gotten to chat, it sounds like you've got a lot of stuff going on. I remember you mentioning you're also at the fire department in kind of the training officer role. Sounds like you've got a growing family. You mentioned how you're also taking care of your elderly parents. And boy, it sounds like you got a lot going on. But I just really wanted to be clear. Being on time isn't negotiable in our organization. And then I could go into if I needed to remind about a policy, or I needed to, maybe there's a progressive discipline that kicks in. But I can just be that direct. I don't have to be, John, I need to have an expectation conversation with you. No, let me try if I could, and please help me polish these, John. Let me try them in a cultural way. And again, could be similar. Hey, you got a couple minutes? Now remember, no poop. I don't start with, how was your weekend? What happened here? I don't do the poop sandwich. Is, hey, John, I wanted to talk with you. Do you got a couple secs?
Sure.
I've noticed 5 tardies. I know sometimes the time card system might not be correct. I just wanted to check, is that correct? Do you have 5?
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk with you just a couple minutes about kind of our culture. One of the things that has always been part of our culture is how our crews help each other. And often many of our crews come in early. Now, certainly as your employer, I wouldn't ask of you in the sense of we pay you for the time you work here, but it's just been kind of one of our culture things. Often crew members will call in when they're about 15 minutes out to just say, hey, if you're on coverage, I can come meet you there. I just want to let you know, maybe if there's a transfer pending, I'll get in sooner. So not only being on time is a critical part of this culture of where we help each other, we have each other's backs, but it's something that people actually often come early. So I know where you worked before. You've often talked about how many of the things we do here, you didn't do there. I just want to really be clear. Our culture of helping each other out is one where we're always on time.
So I love that you couched that with warmth, and it's an invitation into being part of our culture. And I would say that we could even roll this back to even be lighter. I would say that cultural expectations can be talked about in ways that are just about how do we create this amazing organization. Hey, Aarron, I just wanted to talk to you about how we're really trying to create this place where people love to come to work.
Oh, okay.
And I wanted to talk to you about some of the things that make that really special. One of the things that often people complain about in other organizations is the drama, and the backbiting and the way people disrespect one another. And what we're
that stuff.
Yeah. So here we're trying to do something different, and what we're really expecting of our employees is, and so we go on to explain that. And I would say that what the research is showing for 18 to 25-year-olds in the military and elite athletic organizations is that what's sold to them, what's really sold to them is the idea that they can be part of something that will enhance their lives. But it takes a sacrifice from them. And it by talking about the expectations of what it's like to work here is continuing to invite them to make a decision, right? So the decision that they need to make is do I want to really invest? So there's a big difference between getting a job, coming to work at your ambulance service, Aarron. There's a difference between just me saying yes to the employment offer and coming working there and being highly engaged.
Yeah.
And that's what we need supervisors to understand. And I know we're running out of time now, so I just will
Yes.
sum up a couple of things about that, which is when you're trying to invite people into being enthused and committed to an organization, people want to be committed to organizations where the bar is set high. That's why this conversation is so important.
I can stand proud. I can hold my head high. It's why, even though 50% of the people who fail out of the SEALs program, for example, and people know that, they continue to line up because of the prestige of being part of something like that.
Yeah. So and we can talk about this more in the future, but here's what I want to wrap up from my point of view, which is everybody wants to hurry up and get to expectation conversations, but if you haven't done the connecting conversation, it won't work.
That's where I wanted to go, John.
Yeah.
Which is, imagine if I know John really well, if I know the people that I work with really well, I know which style of expectation conversation to have. I know John really well. So I don't need to fluff it. I can, hey, John, I've sent you 5 emails. You haven't responded to them. John will go, got it. Don't need anything more. And we met in one of our leadership academies years ago, a master sergeant or a chief petty officer, a senior enlisted soldier in our nation's armed services. And I remember asking him how many people he had disciplined in his 30 plus years. And he says, I think 3. I'm like, 3? I've done 3 this week. And he went on to tell us a story about how he knew his people so well that he knew how to have those conversations with them. And they immediately heard, they connected, they listened with these things and this thing and this thing, because the chief knew how to influence them. He knew how to have, because he had vested, in this particular example, a lot of time connecting with them.
Yeah, so I just want to say in closing, I'm not perfect at this. I'm still learning. And the joy is, as we teach this, the old saying goes, we teach what we most need to learn.
Yeah.
And the exciting things is I'm really learning how to do both a deep sense of connecting with people and then also really being able to warmly outline the expectations. Yeah. And to listen to what their expectations are as well.
Well, and John, just to close as well, you often share this wonderful quote from Paul Tillich, which is the first duty of love is to listen. So if we want to engage people, we need to listen.
Yeah.
If we want a solution to many of the challenges we're having in our workforce today, we need to listen. We need to have connecting conversations. We don't have to get a master's degree and all kinds of things. What people are desperate for, again, read the material about the Great Resignation, is they want to be listened to. And we do that through connecting. And then when we build that foundation, we build that sturdy house. Then we can start doing things like connecting, and then maybe encouraging, and then maybe influence and storytelling and many of the other conversations. Well, John, I'm shocked that we had enough information to talk about in the hour that we've had.
Well, I just want to thank people for joining and please reach out. We hope that these are useful, but the feedback is always valuable. Last time we got some really great feedback, and let us know what you're thinking. We also love challenges or questions or critiques. So keep us posted on what you're doing, and we'll look forward to the next one next month.
Any topics that you'd ever like us to cover, please let us know. Thanks, John. Thanks, Megan. And thanks, everybody, for listening in.
Thank you.